Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Ayin Zayin. We just saw a statement by Rava that someone hires laborers to till the field, and then rain comes, and now they cannot till it anymore. So he makes a distinction between whether the landowner went the night before to check to make sure that everything was good, and he did everything he could. Then he does not have to pay the laborers. It's their problem. But if he did not go and check the night before, he didn't do everything he could. He was negligent, and if he went, he might have seen that. Oh, you know what? It looks like it's not going to need the laborers. Then he has to pay them as idle workers. And now we're going to follow up with 3 more statements of Rava with similar cases. Amar Rava, Haiman deogir le'agure ledavla, ve'ata mitra peseda de po'alim, ata nahara peseda de balabayit, ve'ahib lehu kepo'el batel. If a landowner hired workers, this time is not to till the land, but rather to draw water from the river to irrigate the field. And then it turns out it rains, and now they don't need to irrigate it anymore. This is a bit different from the previous one. In the previous one, they can't do their work. Their work is not done at all. Here, the work is done automatically by the rain, so they don't have to do it. So does he still have to pay them? Well, so if it came from the rain, well then the workers, it's their problem. They have to take the loss. The workers can look up at the sky and see if it's cloudy or not, so they can assess themselves the likelihood of there being rain, and they accepted the job anyway, even though it might have felt already a bit humid. And so since they accepted the job, they accept the responsibility, and so he does not pay them. However, if it's the river that comes up, and apparently this is a local phenomenon that the homeowner would know, and he didn't check before to see if the river is high, is it going to need, or is not going to need it. The laborers, they don't have access to the river right there in his near his field, and therefore the homeowner had needed to do everything he could to check whether the river was high or not, and therefore if he does not do that and the river overflows, so then he is responsible and he has to pay them, albeit since they're not actually doing the work. He doesn't have to pay them for the hard work that they do, but rather has to pay them like an idle laborer. Similar case of a landowner that hires workers to irrigate the field. And then the river that they were drawing water from stops up in the middle of the day and there's no more water. They cannot work anymore. They can't complete the job. Now, if this never happens, this is like, wow, once in 100 years, this never happened before that the water stopped up. It's totally unexpected. The homeowner could not have expected it. So it's a surprise to everyone. In that case, the workers lose out. They won't get paid for the rest of the day. But if this is a river that does stop up every so often, so if the workers are from around there, they're from that village, and they know the risks involved, they agreed to the project knowing that if there's no water, they won't be able to work and they won't get paid. So then they accepted the risk and they lose the wages for the rest of the day. But if they are not from around there, from that village, they would have no way of knowing. In that case, it's the responsibility of the homeowner, of the landowner, and he would have to pay them as po'el batel. Now, a similar case, he hired them to do a certain job, and they finished the job fast. Maybe it wasn't so clear how long this would take. He hired them to move all these boxes over from here to there. They finished fast in half of the day. But he hired them for a whole day's work. So now what? Now, if the employer has other work that is easier than that, or even if it's the same work, he hired them to carry 20-pound boxes, he has 10-pound boxes. Okay, move them. Even if he has more 20-pound boxes, that's fine. He can say, listen, I know you finished this pile. I hired you for the whole day to move 20-pound boxes. Move these also. However, the kashamina la mafkad lehu v'noten lahem secharan mishalem. However, he cannot ask them to do heavy, more difficult work than he first told them and carry 30-pound boxes. Okay. So he can give them, he can keep them busy the rest of the day with the same or easier type of work, and he has to pay them full wages. Amai. Now we ask, why does he have to pay them fully? Yeah, he can give them work, but why does it pay him fully? Why can't he say, listen, I have no more work for you. I'll pay you like an idle worker for the rest of the day, which is at a discount. Oh, Rava said this halacha with regard to the workers of Mechoza, who were very strong and wanted to keep their muscles strong. If they don't work for half a day, then they're going to become weaker. Their muscles will not be strong. They'll be lazy, idle by being idle. So they want to work. They want to work a full day and keep their strength up, so they can demand, you can give us more work, but you have to pay us a full amount. Amar Mor, Shamin lahem et ma she'asu. Kesad haya yafe shisha dinarim noten lahem sela. We now quote a section of the Braita that we discussed yesterday. I'll bring it up here so we can remind ourselves. This is where a case where someone, employer hired workers to, let's say, complete a garment, weave a garment, for 2 selaim, and then they did half of it, and then they changed their mind. So we assess what they did. Now, what if the price of the price of labor went up? That would explain why they want to quit in the middle. You see, they got 2 selaim to do a whole job. They did half the job, and now they can quit in the middle and go get a new job for 50% more. 6 dinarim is a selah and a half. And so there's 2 opinions, Tanakama and Rabbi Dosa. Tanakama says the owner nevertheless has to pay them 1 selah for half of the work they did. Or he can, even though it's going to cost him a selah and a half to hire new workers. Or if they want, it's their prerogative, they can complete the whole thing and get 2 selaim. And then we add another line, im selah, if the value of labor remains 1 selah, then he gives them 1 selah for the labor they did, and he can hire someone else for the rest of the labor also for 1 selah. So we comment on this. This is Rabbanan, and this means ka sabre Rabbanan yad poel al elyona. The laborers have the advantage, even though the laborers are the ones that reneged on the deal in the middle. They did half the work and they went away. Still, the employer has to pay them for the work they did, even though it may cost him now more to hire someone else. They're not slaves. He can't force them to work. If they want to quit, they get paid pro rata for the work that they did. Now, the last line of there says, "O yigmeru melachtan v'yitelu shene selaim." The next line says, if they want, instead of getting 1 selah for the work they did, they can complete all the work and get the 2 selaim, which is what they originally contracted for. We ask Peshita, isn't that obvious? Obviously, they can complete the work and get 2 selaim. La siricha de'iyakar abidata v'imru po'alim v'hazal ba'alabayit ufaisinhu. It could be that we're talking about a case where the value of labor went up. That's why they wanted to quit. In the first place, they could get more elsewhere. And so they left, they quit. And then the homeowner appeased them and said, just finish the job. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Mahudetema masu amrile ki mai payasina nadata de tafat lan agra. Kamashmalan damalehu adata dit rachna lehu bachila ushtiya. So I might have thought that the workers can say, well, when you appeased us and you said, oh, I'll take care of you, just come back to work. We thought you meant that you're going to pay us more, right? The value now of the rest of our work is a 1.5 selah. So we thought that you're going to pay us more. And so this line of the Baraita teaches us not so. The owner can tell them, no, when I said I'll take care of you, I just meant that I'll give you better food and drink. Instead of giving you just a standard lunch, I'll give you a little extra pastrami sandwiches instead of tuna sandwiches. And that's what I meant. And I'll give that to you. But I didn't mean that I'm going to pay you according to the higher market value. And so the owner has a right to say that. Now, the next line in that Braita said, Sela noten lahem sela peshita. If the value of labor remains 1 selah for the half job that they did and for the rest of the job, then he only has to pay them one selah for what they did, because he can hire someone else for a selah. Obviously he can. I mean, this is a simple case. La siricha dezal abidata meikara ve'agrinu betve zuza ulesof ayikar abidata ve'kam betve zuza. We need this to teach us a chidush in a case where, when they first contracted, when they made their negotiation at first, the price of labor had gone down. The usual price of labor is 2 selah for this job, and at that point it had gone down by 1 zuz, and so the owner said, I'll pay you the current market value, which is less. And they didn't want to take that. So they said no. So they negotiated. And then the owner said, I'll give you 1 zuz more than the current market value, which then brought it up to 2 sela'im. And now, when in the middle of the job that they walked off, the value of labor went back to the normal average of 2 sela'im, which is already 1 zuz more than they had contracted for. So I might have thought, Ma'udetema amrile tefezuze amart lan tefezuze hablan. We might have thought that the workers can say, when we originally negotiated, you said you would give us 1 zuz more than the market price, and since then, now we're in the middle of the job, the market value of labor went up to 2 sela'im, so now you have to give us 1 more zuz than 2 sela'im plus another zuz. And so we learn from this line of the Baraita that the boss can tell them, when I promised you an extra zuz, that's when you had not yet agreed, and you didn't want to take the lesser market value then, so to get you to work, I had to promise you 1 zuz, and I meant it. It was 1 zuz then the then market price, but then you were okay with it. Now you already accepted this price of 2 sela'im, and that's the final price, so I don't have to give you 1 zuz more of the current market price, which is already higher than what it was before. And so this teaches us that even if there's a change in the market price, even if he said, I'll give you 1 more zuz than the market price, he means the market price then at the time of negotiation, not the future market price. Now, the next section of the Braita gives the alternate opinion of Rabbi Dosa Omer Shamin Lahem et ma she'atid lehe'asot. Rabbi Dosa says we're tougher on the laborers who renege, and the owner only has to can deduct from what he pays them the amount that he will have to expend in order to finish the job, which if labor goes up would be more. So if the price of labor went up to 1.5 selah, and he's going to have to pay that amount to finish this garment, so he deducts that from the full amount he agreed with to 2 selah with them. He's going to have to pay 1.5 to someone else. So he only gives the laborers 1 shekel, which is half of a selah. So you see, the Rabbi Dosa says that the laborers who renege on their deal, they are at a disadvantage. They will get the lesser amount, and the owner gets to pay them only the leftover of what he's going to have to expend in order to finish the garment. Now that Baraita continues and says, if the laborers choose, they don't want to get only 1 shekel, if they want to finish the job and get the 2 sela'im that they had agreed to, they can. Peshita, of course they can. That would be the normal case. La siricha dezal abidata ve'emar bal habayit ve'azul po'alim ufaisuhu. We're talking about a case where the price of labor actually went down at the time when they reneged, and now the homeowner can say, listen, I don't need you guys anymore. Or maybe the homeowner is the one that reneged on the deal and said, I don't need you anymore. I'll pay you for what you did so far, 1 selah, and I'm going to go get some other laborers for cheaper. And then the laborers appeased him and said, don't worry, let us finish the work, and we'll make it right. So you see, Rabbi I might have thought that the boss can say to the laborers, listen, laborers, when you said you'll take care, you'll finish it and you'll make it right, I thought you were agreeing to be paid less according to the current market value for the rest of it. So this line teaches us that the laborers can say, no, what we meant when we said we'll make it right by you, that we'll do better work than usual because you're paying us above the market value. We agreed to work really hard and do real quality work for you. That's what we meant, but we didn't mean that we would accept less than what the original contract was for. And so this line teaches us that they can make that claim. Now, the Baraita continues and says, Sela noten lahem sela. If the value of the labor is still 1 sela now, and they renege in the middle, then the boss has to still pay them 1 sela for their work. Peshita, isn't that obvious? Right? Nothing changed. So what's the problem? Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Natan la sericha. Te'ozilu inhu gabez uza me'ikara ulsof zal abideta. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Natan, explains that we're talking about a case where during the original negotiation, the boss was a good negotiator and he got them to agree that they would accept 1 zuz less at that time. And so we might have thought that now that the value of labor altogether decreased, so they might have said, Ma'odatema besir zuza amri tuli besir zuza yahibna lechu. We might have thought that the boss can say, remember in the negotiations you said that you would accept 1 zuz less than the market value, which at that time brought it down to 2 selaim. So now that the value of labor is even less, so I should be able to deduct even from that and give you even less. Kamashmalan damrile ki amarna lach bebasir zuza telahavakim lach hashtakim lach. And the employees can say, when we agreed to take 1 zuz less, that was when you had not yet agreed, and so we had to negotiate ourselves and accept less, and at that time that was 1 less than whatever that market value was before, and that ended up being 2 selaim. However, now that you have agreed to the 2 selaim, you have to keep your word, right? And you already agreed to it, and so we don't have to accept less than the current market value, but rather than of the previous market value. You see, this is just the inverse of what we had before. Amar Rav halacha ke Rabbi Dosa. So Rav says, I agree with Rabbi Dosa that the employer has the upper hand and he can pay them the lesser amount and they deduct what he's going to have to pay to the next set of laborers to finish the job. Umi amar Rav hachi v'amar Rav poel yachol lachzor bo afilu b'chasi hayom. Hold on, does Rav really think that? Because Rav also said that the worker can change his mind and stop working even in the middle of the day, with the implication being that he gets paid half of the wages and not and is not deducted further of what the boss will have to pay someone else. So this seems to be a contradiction. So maybe you'll answer, Rabbi Dosa himself distinguishes between 2 cases, one of a hired laborer, that's what Rav was talking about, that a hired laborer, a day laborer who's just paid for the day, he can renege and still get paid, pro rata. If he worked half the day, he gets half. Whereas Rabbi Dosa, when he said that the boss has the upper hand, that was talking about a contract laborer, someone who gets paid for a whole job, right? As the case was there, they decided a price for weaving an entire garment, not by the hour or by the day, but by the job. And in that case, the boss, if the laborer stops in the middle, the boss can pay him less. ומי שנה והתניא, הסוחרת הפועל ולחסי היום, שמע שמת לא מת, או שאחזתו חמה, אם שכיר הוא נותן לו שכרו, אם קבלן הוא נותן לו קבלנותו. Now, is it true that Rabbi Dosa makes a distinction between a day laborer and a contractor? Look at the following Baraita. Let's analyze. It says that someone who hires workers, and then in the middle of the day, if they're working half a day, the worker hears that he has a relative who died. He has to go and take care of the body and the funeral, or the worker has a fever and he has to leave. So he's forced in the middle of the day to leave. It's not by choice. Now, it depends, according to this baraita. If he is a day laborer, then the boss has to pay him his wages prorated for that half of the day, or however long he worked. And also, if he's a contractor, he has to pay for the amount of the contracted work that he did before he left. So you see that in this case, no matter what kind of worker it is, and he leaves on his own account, because he has an emergency, so he does get paid. Now, who is the author of this baraita? Mane, ilem Rabbanan, ma'iri Hashem Hashemet lo met, o shachazutu chamad de'anis, ki la'anis nameha amru Rabbanan, yad poel al elyon. So if you say the author of this baraita is the Tanakama is Rabbanan, then why would you have to specify a case where he heard that a relative died or that he got a fever, because it is now beyond his control? Even if it was not on this situation, even if he just decided, you know what, I don't feel like working anymore, and he walked off the job, Rabbanan say that the worker has the advantage and he has that right to just stop working and will still get paid prorated. So this cannot be the opinion of Rabbanan. Ela lav Rabbi Dosa hi ushma mina la shanele Rabbi Dosa ben sechirut la kablanut. Rather, the author must be Rabbi Dosa, and we see that Rabbi Dosa makes no distinction between the two kinds of workers, between a day laborer and a contractor. So we cannot give an answer to that we did. That Rav, when he said halakha is like Rabbi Dosa, he meant that's a contractor, and when so they cannot. And when he said that the worker can go back on his word, that was also Rabbi Dosa, and that was talking about a day laborer. You cannot say that, because here this baraita must be the opinion of Rabbi Dosa, and it makes no distinction between the two. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak b'davar ha'avud d'virei hakol. Nachman bar Yitzchak says it could be that is in fact the opinion of Rabbanan, and it's talking about a situation where there will be financial loss, like the guy who's soaking the boss is soaking flax and needs to be taken out precisely at a certain time, and if it goes too late, it'll all be ruined. And then if the workers just walk off the job and they just don't show up and they don't take out the flax on time, they are responsible. Whereas if there was that same situation, but they had an emergency, that they had a fever, he had someone who died in the family, and they left, then that's the chidush here, that the boss has to pay them for whatever amount of work they did, even though by leaving early, it was some time-sensitive matter, and they had to leave. Let's say in the middle of a wedding, the band, someone in the band hears that falls ill, seriously ill, right? They go to the hospital. What are you going to do? You make them stay and play? So they get paid for, but if they were there half the wedding, they get paid half the wages, even according to Rabbanan. That's the chidush. Rabbanan say a worker can always walk out on a regular job, but if it's a davar haved, then the worker cannot walk out unless they have an emergency situation. That's what that was talking about. Okay, so therefore that's not a challenge, and so we go back to our answer that Rabbi Dosa perhaps can be in agreement with what Rav said, and Rabbi Dosa agrees that a day laborer can leave in the middle of a job and get paid, but a job contractor cannot. So we challenge that as well from our Mishnah. Tenan, kol hamshaneh yado ala tachtona, v'chol hachozer bo yado ala tachtona. And our Mishnah said both of these statements, and we're wondering, these are added statements. It's giving like a general rule at the end. What are they coming to add to for us? Bishlam kol hamshaneh yado ala tachtona desatam lan tana k'Rabbi Dosa. When it says anyone who changes from the terms of the agreement, they are at the disadvantage. That here, our Mishnah is saying stam like Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to see later on, there is a Mishnah, we already saw also in Baba Kama a few times, that if someone gives some clothing to a dyer, it says dye it red, and the dyer instead dyes it green. And so he changed from the details of what he was supposed to do. In that case, the owner of the garment still has to pay the dyer, but he can, because he did do something, but he pays them the lesser value of the expenses of the dyer, or how much it's worth more now. So the owner who didn't do anything wrong gets the advantage, and the one who changed gets the disadvantage. Okay, we understand that line. But what does it say? Anyone who reneges and either doesn't show up to work, or it says don't come to work, they're at a disadvantage, right? What is that coming to add? Is it not coming to teach us this very point, that even if it's a day laborer, according to the bidosa, if they change, then they are at a disadvantage. So there's no difference. Not only a contractor, even a day laborer. That's the point of this very line. Therefore, surely the bidosa felt that a worker is not allowed to renege. I mean, if they do, I mean, they can. They don't have to be forced to work. But if they renege, either kind of labor, day labor or a contractor, then they're at the disadvantage. And if it will cost more to the boss to have to hire someone else, then they can deduct all of that from whatever they end up paying the worker. So the bidosa makes no distinction. And Rav, we can still resolve what he said. When he said halacha is like a bidosa, he meant that's for a contractor. And when he said that a day laborer can renege without and still have the advantage, there he was disagreeing with Rabbi Dosa. He only agreed with Rabbi Dosa in one point, but not on the other point. Or there's another interpretation of that line in the Mishnah that has nothing to do with Rabbi Dosa, and there will be no proof or disproof at all about Rabbi Dosa from this. When the Mishnah said anyone who reneges is at the disadvantage, it was talking about the following case in Exodus Beraita. כל החוזר בו כסד, הרי שמכר שדה לחברו ב1,000 זוז, ונתן לו מעות מהן 200 זוז. בזמן שהמוכר חוזר בו, יד הלוקח על העליונה. If someone sold land to someone else for 1,000 zuz, this is the total sale price. The buyer only paid 200 zuz in the time being, and still is coming up with the rest of the money. And then whichever one of the two parties reneges, they will be at a disadvantage. So let's see each case in turn. If it's the seller that reneges on the deal, then the seller will be at a disadvantage. The buyer will be at an advantage. What's the advantage of the buyer? He already gave the 200. So, and then the seller reneges. So what's the buyer's choice? He can say, give me my money back. I forget it. I want my money back. I don't want to deal with you anymore. Or he could say, give me the portion of the land, 1/5 of the land. I paid you 1/5 of the total. Give me 1/5 of the land. It's up to him to decide. He can't force the seller to sell the entire thing, but he can force him to sell that much. And when he gets 20% of the land, what does he get? What kind of land can he get? Min ha'idit, from the best of the land. Because he's on the upper hand, so he can choose the best of whatever he wants. Now, if the other way around, the buyer reneges on, he paid 200, says, you know what, I don't want the land anymore. I'm not going to pay you the rest of the 800. So what choices does the seller have? Because now the seller has the upper hand. He can say, take your $200 back. Or he can say, take 20% of the land according to what you paid. Whatever's better for the seller, whatever's a better deal for him. And what part of land does he choose? Can he choose? He can choose the inferior quality land, right? He can give that to the buyer. Buyer, you're the one that reneged on the deal, you get the worst quality land. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omed, Melamedin oto shelo yachzeru. Rashbag says, we don't want the situation to happen that if someone pays a down payment, which you often pay a down payment, and then you pay the rest, that people are going to change their minds in the middle, and it's going to cause fighting. So he wants to prevent this from ever getting there, and therefore we prevent this in the following way. Kesad. Kotev lo, ani piloni ben piloni macharti sadeh piloni tefloni be1,000 zuz, v'natani mehem 200 zuz, v'hareni noshe bo shemone meot zuz. When someone pays a down payment, we have them write a contract, and it says, I seller sold this land to this Mr. Buyer for 1,000 zuz, and he gave me 200 of the zuz, and the 800 is a loan that he owes me. And that way the sale is final, the sale was complete, and the buyer now has the entire land. And now separately he also owes money, but that's turned into a loan, and it's not that the sale is still not done yet. Kana umachazir lo et hashe'ar afilu lachar kama shanim. Therefore, even though he paid 200, he acquires the entire land, and he will have to return. He will have to pay the rest of the 800 at some point. Could be he'll do it after many years. Now, after many years, whatever it is, but it is a final sale, and nobody can renege on it. Amar mor mehechan magbehu. Now we're going to analyze that braita. Anyway, that braita is what the Mishnah was referring to when it says anyone who reneges has the lower hand. But now we're going to analyze when we said from which part of the land does he choose min ha'idit. If it was the buyer who reneged on the deal, if it was the seller that reneged on the deal, then the buyer can say, give me 20% of the land, and I want the best land. Now, what does that mean? Best of what? Right now, it sounds like he's getting the best of all of the property of the seller. The seller has many properties, and so give me the best of everything. Now, we ask about that. So, how are you looking at the situation? The sale is not going through totally, right? Because he's not getting all of the land, and so what is he? He's owed this, right? Even though the seller reneged on the deal, okay, but he has to still pay back the buyer the 200, and the buyer says, I want land. I want you to pay me in land. Well, if it's when someone is owed something, they get paid with benonit, with medium land, not idit. So why should the buyer in this case get idit? That's one question. And second, the stronger question, he's trying to buy this particular land. So whatever this particular land is, he should get 20% of that land, not necessarily of the best of all the lands that the seller has. So why does it make any sense that he should get the best land? Amar Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak me'idit sheba u'miziburit sheba. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak explains that when it says the best land, it's not the best of all the lands of the seller, but rather the best of the land that he was buying. This $1,000 piece of land, the buyer paid $200. The seller reneged on the deal. The buyer says, well, I still want a portion of the land, so he gets to choose the best part of the land that they were dealing with. There's different sections. There's better part and worse part of that $1,000 land. Give me the best part. And then the flip side, if it's the buyer that reneged, and then the seller said, listen, it's better for me to just give you some land, the seller can give the worst section, 20% section of that land. So it's not talking about of all of his property, but of that particular land, which makes sense. That's what they were buying and selling. Rav Acha bered Rav Ika amar, afilu tema me'idit din chasav, stam man deyazabin ar'a be'alfa zuzeh, o zule mozil umzaben nechasav, v'avale kenizak utnan, hanizakin shamin lahen be'idit. Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, defends our original hypothesis that if the seller reneges on the deal, the buyer can get the best of all of the land of the seller, not from this particular field. How does he explain this? Because usually when someone buys a piece of land for $1,000, this is a significant amount, he doesn't have cash on hand. He probably has to sell other possessions that he has, and he has to sell them, quickly so that he can make this deal. So he's probably selling those at a discount. And so it's worth it for him if this deal is going to go through. I'll sell some other property quickly at a discount because I need the cash now. I'm going to buy this land. Now he's sold all those things and he's ready to buy the land, and the seller then reneges on the deal. So this causes harm. It's not just that he doesn't get this land that he wanted. It also causes his harm because he had to sell other things at a discount. And therefore he's called a nizak, an injured party. And the Mishnah says that when someone injures someone else, the injurer has to pay with the best of all of their land to the injured party. And that is the principle that applies in this case. We next analyze the statement of Rashbag. Remember, he said, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer melamedin oto shelo yachzeru. Rashbag wanted to prevent such a thing from happening, that the buyer gives a down payment of 200 and then one or the other reneges on the deal, and then they have to figure out, okay, do you want to keep the money, return the money, give a portion of the land? This is all going to lead to fighting. So let's preempt by having them write the following contract. Kesav kotev lo, ani peloni ben peloni. Right, you just say, I am selling to you this field for 1,000 dinar, and the sale is final right now. And you pay 200 and the other 800 is a loan. And that way we know it's a final sale no matter what. And there won't be any problems later on. Now we analyze. Tama de katab lehachi, halo katav hachi lakane. So we see, according to Rashbag, it's only if you write this contract, then it's considered a final sale. But if they do not write such a contract, then it is not a final sale. And then you'll have the same problems that, did you buy only a part of the land or return the money? But now we have another braita that quotes Rashbag and seems to contradict that. Without a document, then there would be no sale. The question will come from the continuation of the braita. We're going to have three opinions here. הנותן ערבון לך ברוב אמר לו, אם אני חוזר בי ערבוני מחול לך, והלה אומר, אם אני חוזר בי אכפול לך ערבונך, נתקיימו התנאים, דיבר רבי יוסי לתעמד, אמר אסמכתה קניה. You have a case where someone gives a down payment to his friend. I'm going to buy your field for 200. Here is the down payment. And the other, and he says, the buyer says, listen, if I renege on the deal, and I say I'm not going to go through with the rest of it, you can keep the entire 200. You don't even have to return anything. And the seller says, if I renege on the deal, I will give you back 400. I'll give you back double of what you gave me. In other words, both of them are so sure that they're not going to renege that they're willing to even lose out 200. If they're willing to say that they'll lose 200 if they renege. And so, if they do that, those stipulations are valid, then they will in fact have to pay according to the Rabbi Yosef. The Gemara interrupts the Braita to explain that Rabbi Yosef follows his own opinion, because in general he says, asmachta, even an inconclusive consent, a kind of thing that person says, I'll give you $1 million if it rains tomorrow. He doesn't really mean it. He just wants to back up his words. That's a asmachta. He's giving support to his words. But Rabbi Yosef says, no, he really does mean it. Because he's saying, I will give you 200, so that is, it takes effect. It's an acquisition, and they do have to pay. All right, that's opinion number one. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Dayoshi Kne Keneged Arbono. Rabbi Yehuda says that if you give 200 down payment, then he acquires that much. That if that's 20% of the payment, he acquires 20% of the land. And so, if the other party reneges, he still deserves to get 20% of the land or his money back. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rashbag, however, says, I would agree with Rabbi Yehuda only in the case where he gives the 200 zuz and he says, I want this down payment to effect an acquisition. Obviously not of the whole thing, because he didn't pay for the whole thing, so he can't get the whole thing. But he wants it to be an acquisition for 20% of the land. In other words, I don't want this only to be a down payment for the eventual payment of the whole thing. I want this to take effect now. It'll take effect on that part. So if he says that, then fine. It's a partial sale. It's like buying something piece by piece. I buy this piece now. I make more money later. I buy the next piece. That's fine. However, aval machar lo sadeh ב-1,000 zuz ונתן לו מהם 500 zuz, קנה, מחזיר לו את השאר אפילו לאחר כמה שנים. However, if he doesn't say anything at all, and someone sells a piece of land for 1,000 zuz, and the other one gives him 500. Doesn't matter how much the amount is, whatever. So then that is a final sale immediately, and the rest of it is considered a loan, and he will have to pay it back eventually, whatever the terms of the loan are. Even if it's after many years, we consider it a final sale now. And here's the challenge. Up above, we said that according to Rashbag, you have to write a contract that says this 200 finalizes the sale, and the rest of the 800 is a loan. You have to write that, and if you don't write that, then it's not a final sale. But here he says, even if you don't write anything, even if you don't say anything, it's a final sale immediately with a down payment. So this is the challenge. The answer, la kashya. Hadeka ayil v'nafek azuzeh, hadela ka ayil v'nafek azuzeh. The Braita above was talking about a case where the seller keeps going in and out to get money. He keeps going all the time. Where's the money? Where's the money? He's very persistent. By doing that, he shows that he does not want it to be a sale now with just a loan. He wants the money now up front. He needs it. And he doesn't want it to be a sale with just a partial payment and the rest as a loan. That's what it's talking about above. Unless he actually writes it down, then if he writes it down in the contract, then it doesn't matter if he's persistent. But he needs to write it down in such a case. Whereas the Braita that we said right over here is where he's not persistent. He got the 500 zuz as the down payment, and then he's not going in and out and persisting that for the payment, because he's okay to make the sale now, and the other guy will pay like a mortgage. He'll pay next year, this year, next year, whatever the terms of the loan are, he will pay eventually. So that shows that he's happy to make the sale now, and the rest be paid as a loan later. This distinction that we use to answer the challenge between the two, but I thought is actually stated by Rava, because he says that someone who sells something to his friend, if he's persistent in getting the money for the sale, then the sale does not go through until he collects all of the money. But if he's not persistent in collecting it and he just got a down payment, that means he's okay with doing the sale now, and the rest he'll pay as a loan later. And then one last statement that Rava says, V'amar Rava, Ha'man de osfe me'azuzeh lechabre, u'fera'eh zuza, Pera'on haveh ela d'it le tar'omet gabeh, Tamar le afsedetinhu minai. Someone who lent out 100 dinar, and the other guy paid it back, but not didn't pay back all at once 100 dinar in a stack, but rather paid him 1 dinar today, another dinar later, one more dinar tomorrow. He paid it 1 dinar at a time. So that is considered a payment, right? If you want to pay your bill 1 cent at a time. I know someone who used to pay his phone bills and electric bills by sending 1 cent checks, because from the bank allows you to send bill pay even for 1 cent. So he wanted to make fun of the system, and he sent hundreds of 1 cent checks that the bank had to pay a stamp for each one. Okay, he thought that was fun to do. Okay, so it is considered payment. It's true they have to process how much time it takes to process all of the thousands of checks that he sent. Okay, but it is still considered a payment. However, the lender can make an official complaint against him. He can't collect money for that, but because he got all his money. But the complaint is, you caused me to lose out the 100 dinar. How do you make him lose it? If he would pay 100 coins all at the same time, he would have the 100 coins all at once, and he would say, well, I should do something valuable with this. I should store it up. I should invest it, right? Do something good with it. But if you get 1 coin at a time, so 1 coin, you say, oh, I have an extra coin. I'll buy an extra dinner. I'll buy an extra hat. He just spent it on stuff. He spent it away because it's only a little bit at a time, so he doesn't consider it to be significant enough to store away and invest. And so he can have a complaint about that. However, he did in fact pay back all the money that he owes. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.